the TeachPitch podcast. We are very excited to be launching a series of interviews for TeachPitch, a global community of 50,000 subscribers from over 205 countries to date. And for these interviews, we have selected a number of subscribers who have achieved great things. And by great, I mean amazing. Think of former presidents, entrepreneurs, people who've built hospitals, huge non-profit organizations, successful journalists, doctors, etc. And what all our guests have in common is that despite their great success, they've encountered many enormous challenges. So what were these challenges and how did they overcome them? That's what we're going to be talking about here. My name is Aldo and I'm massively looking forward and very grateful you can join us on this journey. So sit back, relax, and download the podcast here.
We think that education is a human right. It's a human right for every child around the world, quality education. And if there's something that we know about it and we could share our ideas and thoughts, we have to do it. The question was, how?
In this interview, I talk with my guest how she managed to export the Finnish education system to many other places in the world. We discuss her challenges in making sure that this globally admired education model would be fully implemented by her international clients. And we dive into how she kept her business going despite the enormous damaging impact of the COVID crisis. Enjoy this interview with Johanna Jarvinen-Taubert, author of Finnish Education in Practice, What, Where and How. In today's episode, we go back to our teacher roots and explore the state of global education. For this specific interview, we are taking you to Finland. Despite the fact that this country is the world's most northern and one of the most geographically remote states in the world, it is fending very well for itself on an education level. According to a global competitive study of the World Economic Forum of this year, Finland has the most well-developed education in the world. The country also has the highest worldwide ranking when it comes to high school completion. And Finland was again a winner in the first quarter of this year as the world's best education systems ranking. The data keep on piling up that there's something about Finland and education. And I'm very happy that we are joined today by Johanna Jarvinen-Taubert, a former teacher based in the south of Finland. Johanna is one of the authors of the book Finnish Education in Practice, What, Why and How, and founder of the company Learning Scoop that seeks to train teachers all over the world on how they can adopt Finnish methods to improve teaching styles and educational outcomes. Johanna is also a mother of 6 children and loves spending her time in Tampere in the south of Finland by one of the country's most beautiful lakes. Johanna, a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Johanna, let's start with 6 children, because my goodness, when I read that, it's like, wow, incredible.
Yeah, I know I get that reaction very often, and that's why I like to mention it because it makes people surprised. Yes, I do have 6 children. My oldest is 26 years old at the moment, and the youngest is 13. And they are great youngsters, so I'm really proud of them.
And may I ask how many boys and girls? What's the division in the team?
Sure. It's 3 and 3. So it's a boy, a girl, a boy, a girl, a boy, and a girl. So.
Oh, wow. Great exchange between the sexes. Yeah. Wow, that's great to hear. And I'm just curious, such a big family, how does this work? Is it true that they're raising each other a little bit? That at a certain point it goes by itself, or what is it like when you're sitting around your dinner table?
Well, I think it is true. I think it has been easiest with the 2 youngest because they just look what the others are doing and they just follow. So it's been easy in that way. But I think, I don't know, I don't have experience of a smaller family. So for us, I think it really helps that we have 2 parents doing this together. So my husband is very much involved and committed to the family as well. So I think we are enjoying it. But of course, I'm not saying it's easy all the time. We have had our challenges as well. But most of the time, I think it's great fun.
I can imagine. No, definitely very lively, right? That's
Yes, indeed.
Lots of things going on. And so talk to me about Finnish education. So, you hear a lot about Finnish education, of how very well developed it is. And, there's a lot to Finnish education. But, why should we export Finnish education? Why should people start buying into Finnish education? What is for you the number one reason?
Well, I actually think that people shouldn't just copy Finnish education as such. I think one of the secrets behind Finnish education is that it is science-based. Finns are true believers in science, I say very often. So we follow scientific research, not only in Finland, but in other countries as well, closely. And we really try to apply the findings of science into education. So I think that's something that other countries could perhaps look closely into. And I think Finnish education is kind of unique, but it's nothing mysterious. It is based on science, as I said, and we have took a lot of ideas and models from other countries as well. So I think in general, developing the quality of education, I think it's learning from each other. So I think in general, exchanging ideas and experiences is very useful for educators around the world. But I think Finnish education, on the other hand, we are doing some things that are very different from most of the countries. And that's what people are interested in. And I think maybe those are the things that could be something to think of in other countries as well.
Yeah, and that's what I would like to talk about. Where is Finnish education different from other systems? So if you could have a short list of 3 items, which items would that be where Finnish education is different from, for instance, British education?
Well, I'm not an expert in British education. I do know quite a lot about it, but I think it's better that the listeners make their own conclusions. But I think that, for one thing, Finns truly believe that less is more. And by saying that, I mean that it's better to do things well than to do too much of them. I will give you an example. For instance, I think school days in Finland are probably one of the shortest in the whole world. For instance, for our first graders who are 7 years old, the typical school day lasts only 4 hours. And why is that? Because once again, if we look into educational science, there is no proof that having more lessons, having longer school days actually brings better results. Quite the contrary. Children get exhausted, they lose their motivation, and it's not good for them, for their learning or for their well-being. So we prefer quality over quantity, for one thing. And the same goes with homework, for instance. Many people think that Finns don't have any homework at all, or we don't give homework to our students. That's not true. We do give homework, but compared to most of the other countries, it's relatively light. So it should never take more than half an hour to do the homework, especially with the younger students. Maybe with the older ones it's a bit different, but let's say primary school students, half an hour is enough. And very often the students don't get any homework at all. And why is that? Once again, there has been studies done all over the world stating that too much homework is actually harmful for learning. So this is not a Finnish finding. The researchers have concluded this in the United States, in Australia, in many Asian countries and so on. So why do we give too much homework and once again make children exhausted and Also, the motivation is decreasing with that amount of work. So we try to give homework that is useful for learning, not too many repetitive tasks, but rather something that really enhances learning. But it doesn't have to be that much. So I think these are a couple of examples where I think it's not a secret. It's very simple things that we try to apply.
And I mean, we've been hearing a little bit more about that coming from the Nordic countries, because Iceland very recently introduced a 4-day working week instead of 5, and it's still in its experimental phase, but the first results were astounding, that actually people were a lot more productive. Also going with the less is more idea. So what I read into it is basically, don't let it stress you out. Education should not stress you out. I think homework can be a stressor because you need to do something after hours at a moment that, maybe if you're a young child, you'd rather learn more from playing outside, for instance. So, and then having to do math exercises would not make you productive, which would just stress you more out and perhaps make you a little less confident. Is that a little bit the philosophy? Is it about confidence?
It is. I think you're absolutely right. And I think in general, it is very important for us that children feel good about school and learning. And they feel the joy of learning. They get experiences where they are successful, no matter what type of student there is. So for us, that is the source of learning and building that confidence, and also being happy about yourself as a learner. And it's a combination of many things, I think.
And I've done a little research and also, for instance, saw that the academic journey of a Finnish child starts at an older age. So they only go to school at 7, to primary school. Yes. Whereas I think in majority of the countries, I know in France and in Belgium, it's like 3 or 4 they start with the first classes, the first years, which is their kindergarten years. And then as of 6, they start primary. So that's already a full year later, whereby you could argue that a child is already more conscious and ready to learn, right?
Yes. Actually, in Finland, we have what we call early childhood education, which is for children from 1 year until 6 years old. It's optional. If the families want to choose it, it's available for every family in Finland. And that early childhood education is completely non-academic. So it's about free play and developing skills needed later during the learning path. So, of course, children are learning huge amount of things. Learning through play is actually a very powerful way to learn. And they are also developing the needed skills, social skills, cognitive skills, meta skills. But during those years, they have no subjects, no school books, anything like that. And of course, no tests, obviously. And at the age of 6, we actually have what we call pre-primary. But that is very non-academic still. But it is a little bit more structured. No school subjects, but learning areas, more clearly defined, and also preparing children for school, especially in the sense of social skills. So how do I work as a member of a team, and how do I deal with my schoolmates and so on? And that is for 1 year. And our formal schooling starts at the age of 7, as you correctly pointed out, and then they start the first grade. Mm-hmm. But I think during the first years in Finnish basic education, there's a lot of play and childlike activity still. I think it's probably much less formal and academic than in most countries. But our thinking goes that way that we shouldn't push children to learn things they are not prepared yet. So their brains need to develop first. And what I find interesting, so Finnish students start learning how to read and write at the age of 7, which is relatively late compared globally. And many people find that really strange. Well, aren't you lacking valuable years here? But for us, we think that the brain has to be developed enough before pushing reading and writing. And so it's introduced at the age of 7. Of course, there are like skills that are useful for learning that learned earlier. And actually many children learn how to read and write, and we are not prohibiting them or anything like that. But formally, it's at the age of 7 in the first grade. And what happens? Finnish children pick up the skill of reading and writing very quickly. I would say after half a year, everyone in the class usually reads and writes. And when there has been international studies where they have compared 10 years old globally with their reading and writing skills, Finnish students have been the best. So even though we kind of delay teaching reading and writing, they pick up the skill really quickly and become very talented with it. So once again, I think this is an example of less is more in that sense that you don't have to necessarily start so early, but it's better to let children be children and develop those needed skills. Then learning is actually easier later.
Thank you. Thank you for explaining that. And I tend to agree that less is more, and really providing education to the child once the child's completely ready for it. That's what it sounds like. It's a lot more customized for the child, because the child is slightly older and therefore more ready to accept knowledge or, to be taught specific things. Before we go to your challenges, I have one specific question, because you mentioned that from the age of 1 up until 6, you are able to provide some sort of a formation for your child, which is not teaching and learning, but there is the facility to bring your child to childcare. I just want to make sure that such childcare, as well as your entire educational system, it's a public system and it's for free for all families. Is that correct?
Well, actually, the education from the first grade, so the basic education, the secondary education and higher education, all that is free of charge. So it's public. And the only part of the learning journey that has a small fee is actually the early childhood education. So for the years from 1 to 6, if the family wants that. And for those years, this fee is based on the income of the family. So if you're a low-income family, there is no fee at all. But if you have more income, then there's a small fee for that early childhood education, and it's never more than 300 euros per month. So that's the absolute maximum for the wealthy families. So it's relatively cheap, I think, compared to most countries. But from that on, all the education is free for everyone.
Thank you for explaining that. And it sounds like the economic welfare goes hand in hand with the education system. So I think that's important to point out, that such an education system is very befitting with the Finnish economy, or kind of how other things in your country are set up. But here in the UK, you have a big tension between what the public schools provide and what the private schools provide. And the private schools, the quality of education is extremely high. It's the images that we all have from Eton and Harrow, these beautiful boarding schools where sky's the limit when it comes to teaching and learning, versus the inner city public schools that are struggling and that really have problems when it comes to upholding a certain standard in the quality of education. And I think the fact that in Finland everything is on the same level and that it is basically subsidized by the government makes it a lot more easy, of course, for parents to sign up to. So I think that's important to point out, and thank you for explaining that in further detail. So I would like to discuss your challenges, because you are an absolute veteran and have been working in Finnish education for over 20 years. And you kind of made it your job to start exporting Finnish education. Is that correct? You want to teach the world about how Finnish education works and how certain models within Finnish education could be applied to education systems elsewhere.
Yes. Well, my background, first of all, I'm a teacher myself, and I've also worked as a university researcher and a teacher trainer in 2 Finnish universities. And after that, I have been offering in-service teacher training programs in Finland for Finnish teachers for many years. And I always felt that was really inspiring job. But at the same time, I was kind of hoping to get some kind of new challenges. And it was somewhere 2012 when we first realized that there was so much interest towards Finnish education in other countries as well. And at the time we had a project where we were trying to figure out how could we share these models and how could we develop Finnish education export. And during those 2 years that we had that project, we also realized that there were very few organizations providing any services for foreign teachers and foreign principals, even though there was a need for it. And there were people contacting Finland that we would like to learn about your ideas and models. And Finns were like, well, that's nice, but nobody was really offering anything. And then we realized that, well, that could be a very interesting and inspiring job, and we could do it with my colleagues who their background is in teaching as well, and they have worked in the field of education for decades in Finland. So they are teachers, principals, teacher trainers, educators. We realized that we could be offering those services, and we thought that it would be really interesting and fascinating to learn about education in other countries as well. So maybe meeting these clients from other countries, we could learn at the same time as well. And then we established Learning Scoop, and Learning Scoop was one of the first companies in the field of Finnish education export here in Finland. And so it was something really new, and we had to find out our way, because when we began, nobody knew about us, and we had very little references what we could show. Of course, we had them here in Finland, but how to convince clients in other countries that we do know about this thing. So it was an adventure, really.
And just for the understanding of the listeners, could you give an example of what you effectively train the teachers in? So if could you give me an example of a module that you offer to the teachers?
Yes, I think the most common kind of product or service that we have been offering has been what we call study tours. So educators from all over the world come to Finland for 1 week, and we organize them training about different topics, about Finnish education in general, about special education, about management in Finnish schools, about the curriculum and teaching methods and so on. And every day there's also a visit in a local Finnish schools. So we want our visitors to see with their own eyes what is actually happening in Finnish schools. And then during the training sessions, we open up the thinking behind the practices so that they can really understand what they witness. And usually those programs last for 1 week, and we have had visitors from more than 50 different countries around the world coming to learn about Finnish education. But then, of course, very often it happens that people come to Finland, they get inspired and they want to kind of share their new ideas, and they ask us to go to their countries and train their teachers there. So we have also been traveling around the world in all the continents and training teachers in other countries. And that has been like super exciting for me professionally, because then I get to see education in other countries, and it gives us a lot of new ideas and understanding about the different forms of education globally.
That's wonderful. And could you give me an example of one of the countries that you visited, and what did you train the teachers in more specifically?
Well, I've been in Thailand. We were invited to a private school there, which was just opened, and they wanted to apply Finnish educational ideas to their pedagogy and teaching practices. So we were sharing Finnish pedagogical approach and mindset in general, and also about the teaching methods and how lessons are carried out in Finland. In another example, I was in Dominican Republic, and there were government officials in the field of education that we were training about, once again, the cornerstones of Finnish education and how is it applied and why is it like that. And then I've also been training teachers in the United States about entrepreneurship education and phenomenon-based learning and so on. So very different topics, but all based on the Finnish educational ideas and approach.
Thanks. Wow, it sounds very exciting, and also very exciting that you've been all over the world. We'll get back to that later on, because of course there has been a challenge for the past 2 years with all that traveling. But we're going to park that shortly, because first we're going to dive into your second challenge. And that's basically that throughout your traveling, you noticed there was a little bit of a gap. So the kind of, I think, maybe a skills gap between teachers when it came to things like lesson planning or preparing specific things or understanding specific things on a pedagogical level. Is that correct?
It is. It was, of course, we knew that the level of education is very different in different countries, and we do realize that the resources are very different. And in some areas, there's simply no resources or no proper teacher training for teachers. But even though it kind of shocked us to realize that teachers in many countries lack like the very basic understanding of learning and what promotes learning, about effective and motivating teaching methods, which there are plenty, and also about how to plan and deliver inspiring and efficient lessons in general. And when we talked with the local teachers and asked about what kind of training they had for lesson planning and delivering great lessons, it was very limited, or there were none. And for us, it felt really unfair. So in this era of unlimited information that we have at the moment, how is it possible that we still leave out some of the teachers of this core knowledge about learning and promoting learning? And it affects their students, of course. And it's not a question that the teachers don't want to give great lessons, but if they have no knowledge how to do that, it's impossible. And for us, it was somehow unbearable. Finland, our education is based on well-educated, committed, and talented teachers. I would say that's one of the so-called cornerstones. And we train them well. We give them autonomy to carry out their work. And then we realized that this is not the case everywhere. And we thought that, what can we do about it? We think that education is a human right. It's a human right for every child around the world, quality education. And if there's something that we know about it and we could share our ideas and thoughts, we have to do it. The question was how. And then we realized, for instance, my colleague was training teachers in rural Tanzania, and the circumstances were very weak, to be honest. And there were a lot of students, the teachers were struggling, they had no resources at all. What they did have was a mobile phone and even a smartphone, maybe an older model, maybe it was bought, so it was used already, but it was a smartphone anyway, because that's what people have to have. If they get some money, that's what they buy. And we realized that, okay, this teacher who is lacking all the possible resources for his or her lessons, they have smartphones. What if we could provide this core knowledge about learning and promoting learning through that phone? What if we had an app to help teachers in lesson planning and delivering better lessons, and through that providing quality education? That's how we came up with the idea that we should create a mobile app for lesson planning. The problem was, of course, that we had no knowledge, no experience about creating and developing an app. And so we had to find people who knew about that and combine this pedagogical knowledge and with the technological expertise to create an app. And that's what we did. We created Lesson App.
Lesson App. Well, thank you for describing that entire process. I do have two questions. One in line with what you said about the quality of the Finnish teacher, because I've read, and correct me if I'm wrong, that Finnish teachers, you set the bar quite high. So all Finnish teachers, whether it's primary or secondary, they need to have an academic degree. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. And they actually need to have master's degree. Our teachers have master's. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And if I may say one more thing, in Finland, it's really hard to get into teacher training. It's one of the most wanted areas of study. So they get to choose only the very best out of best students. So something like 10% of the applicants actually get into teacher training. And teaching profession is highly respected in Finland. And young people also want to become teachers. I think that's important too.
And why is that, do you think? Because I've read that the average salary is around $29,000 a year, which isn't, it's good money, of course, but it's not the highest salary in the world. So it's not the reimbursement that gives the stature to the position of becoming a teacher. Can you explain, why becoming a teacher is a very wanted profession in Finland?
Yes, you're absolutely right. It's not about money, because Finnish teachers make good salary, but it's nothing extraordinary. Yeah, yes. But what I think is the core is that when Finnish students see their teachers, they realize that they have a lot of autonomy in their work. So they are well educated, they have all this knowledge, and they are free to apply it as they wish. So there is no teacher inspection in Finland. We trust our teachers. They are well educated, so Finnish teachers can decide how they carry out their work, how they deliver lessons, where they do it, what methods they use, what subjects they want to combine and integrate, if they want to collaborate with some other teacher and maybe combine their classes and so on. And they don't have to ask for permission to do anything like this. So if I'm a teacher and today I decide that it's a great weather, let's go to the forest and learn there, I just take my students and off you go. So we trust our teachers, and I think Finnish students realize that if you're a teacher, you have a great education and you're free to use it as the best as you can. And one young person once said me that she feels that teachers are kind of artists. And I think that was beautifully said. And that's how the young people see that profession. But I want to emphasize that being a teacher, it's not all the time that's rosy in Finland either. There are a lot of challenges. there are a lot of different type of stress and pressure, and also teachers demand a lot from themselves, and they have to balance different needs and demands and so on. So of course it is challenging as well. I'm not saying that. But I think compared to most of the other countries, Finnish teachers are really free in their job.
Yeah, and I would agree with the person who earlier said that it sounds almost like an artist profession. To me, it sounds like a very creative profession with a high degree of autonomy, which especially young people are looking for. So I would, yes. If that's the way it is presented to the next generation, then I understand where the attraction comes from. So thank you for explaining that. With regards to the pressure that teachers have, well, that's a global pressure, right? So it's not that teachers in the UK or in other parts of the world, in the United States, they also have the pressure that undoubtedly a Finnish teacher have as well, but they don't have the attraction of the profession. In many cases and in many countries, there's a teacher shortage. And that shortage is also created by the fact that the teaching profession isn't the most popular one. So good on Finnish teachers and good on Finland in general of being able to pitch the teaching profession as something attractive, as something that you want to be a part of. Because I think that's very important to do, to empower teachers and to make sure you create the next teaching workforce. Thank you so much for talking about that in further detail, and also about Lesson App, which is the outcome of trying to educate and train teachers continuously through an application that teachers in Tanzania or in the Dominican Republic or in Thailand can use on their phone. So they're continuously updated on specific knowledge that you have created from Finland. So can teachers use it continuously, Lesson App?
Yes, they can. And now we have users in all over the world. I think the current number, I think it's 148 countries where Lesson App is used. And of course, in many countries, there are only a couple of users because they have just found the app themselves. But we are very happy to see that it is spreading and there are new users coming all the time. And that is we have, in that sense, that has been our goal, to share that quality knowledge that it's not only about Finnish pedagogy, it's global, modern, research-based pedagogy that can be applied anywhere. And we can see the direct link with that type of pedagogy and the learning results. And that's what we want to share and give that possibility for teachers around the world to be able to apply the same knowledge, same models and same pedagogy. So yes, they can use it. There's a basic version for free for everyone, and then there's a premium version with more features and a yearly fee for those who want more advanced models and so on. But anyone can download it and start using it.
And then we go to your third challenge. And your third challenge is actually the pandemic, because you mentioned earlier that your study tours were basically your premium product, and I believe the product that enjoyed the highest uptake. Then came 2020 and the coronavirus and lockdowns everywhere and people not being able to travel. Could you talk a little bit more about that specific challenge, which you describe as the biggest challenge in your professional life?
It was. It truly was. And I think it was a shock. It was something that we were not prepared for at all. And within a couple of weeks, we had to cancel all the study tours because, of course, nobody could travel. And it was a shock. And we really quickly had to think, what now? What can we do in this situation? And also we realized that the need for this type of information, it's not vanished, it's there. And we should be able to serve the educators through some other means. So what can we do? And we had been asked for several years that please could you do some online courses and share your knowledge and share your experiences. And we just never felt we had the time, because online course, if you do it well, it's a complicated task, and we never had that time. Also, we thought suddenly we had all the time, and that's what we did last year. So we developed, I think, around 30 different online courses about different topics related to Finnish education. And we also hold several online webinars to different countries, and then people were able to join. And then we also opened a web shop where people can buy not only these online courses, but also educational products by other Finnish service providers. So it's easy to find them in one place. And we opened Finland Education Shop. So all these type of new lines of work and new business ideas, we had to come up really quickly, also in order to be able to continue our work. I'm really happy that we managed to do it, but I'm not saying it has been easy. It has been really, really challenging. But I know it has been the same thing with so many people around the world. This is something that we have shared globally. I think it's interesting that the whole world has been dealing with this same problem. And I think in that sense, it has also brought us closer to each other.
Most definitely. I also wanted to mention the book here, because that's, how we started talking. The book is also an outcome of you trying to navigate around, the problems that the lockdown gave you. So it's called Finnish Education in Practice: What, Why, and How. What do you want the reader to remember once they've read the book? What are the kind of key takeaways of this book, or why should anyone read this book?
One of the main things we would like people to remember is that even though you cannot change the education system in your country, there are always things you can do differently if you want. And there are options and there are different type of models, and Finland is one example of a different way to approach education. And so there are things that you can do on the grassroots level and in your own classroom. And I think I would really love if our book could somehow open readers' mind that there are options and you can look at education from a different perspective. And if that's accomplished, I think they can come up with great ideas themselves. Of course, they are doing that already, but maybe some new ideas that they have never thought before. So maybe that would be our message. And our book, Finnish Education in Practice, it's in the title already. We try to give practical examples of what Finnish education is all about, because there are many great books about Finnish education that tell about our education system or the theoretical ideas behind it. Some of those topics are dealt in our book as well, but the emphasis is in the practical application. So what do Finnish teachers actually do when they deliver this world-known education, and how is it applied in practice? And that's something we wanted our readers to learn and understand.
Thank you so much, Johanna. Thank you for explaining that. We're almost at the end of this interview, and thank you for taking us through your challenges. Thank you for explaining us in further detail about Finnish education. My two last questions are questions that I ask to every guest. First question is, which book would you recommend?
Well, I think Finnish Lessons by Pasi Salberg is a classic. I think that gives like a great introduction to our education system and the theoretical ideas behind it. But if you have read that already, a book by Professor Kirsti Lonka is another great one, Phenomenal Learning from Finland, and that has more pedagogical perspective, and it opens up how do we see learning and how do we try to promote it. So I said two because it's really, really hard to pick, but those would be my 2 top choices.
Thank you. So Finnish lessons and phenomenal learning from Finland. Those are your recommendations. And then my very last question. Now let's turn the tables. Now it's your turn to invite a guest for a podcast. Who would you want to speak to? Who would you want to interview?
Wow, that's a great question. I don't have any specific name in my mind, but I would love to hear of somebody on the grassroots level. So a teacher who is doing something phenomenal in his or her own work. And I would love to hear somebody from not well-developed country, but for instance, somebody who is doing something special despite the challenging circumstances.
That's a great suggestion, and I'm sure there are many teachers and perhaps teachers listening who would be up to that task. And yeah, I mean, you've come to the right place because, we're a community in over 205 countries and have many teachers like this, I'm sure, who would want to have a conversation with you. So it's a date. Let's set it up for you. Johanna, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us a little bit more about Finnish education and your book, Finnish Education in Practice, What, Why, and How. Where can people get the book?
Well, it's sold in two web shops. First of all, our own web shop, Finland Education Shop, which you can find online, and then also our publisher, Kaito Group from Malta. They have a web shop selling it too. So both places are fine, and by Googling Finnish Education in Practice, you will certainly find the right place.
And we'll be sure to add the links to this interview so people can find it very quickly if they are interested. Johanna, Jarvinen-Taubert, thank you so much what you're doing for education, more specifically in Finland, and thank you so much for trying to export the best education system in the world to other teachers so they get inspired and they make an effort to improve teaching and learning. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure.
If you liked this episode of the Teach Pitch podcast, then it would mean the absolute world if you could share it with your friends and or give it a short review on your preferred podcast platform. The more you share your ideas about these interviews, the more people will find out about them. So do let us know what you think. We'd be very, very grateful.
Special thanks to Kevin MacLeod for our beautiful theme music, Le Grand Chase. This podcast was produced and edited by Natalie Piles. Project coordination by Inva Cheney.